At the time this went down 4 months ago, my wife, 35, and I, 33, had been married for 2 years. I was scheduled to go on a 2-day long business trip, leaving extremely early one day and returning the next day in the evening. Well, after 5 hours of driving, the trip was canceled. I wasn't terribly bothered because I was used to driving and would be compensated for my time. I decided to return home unexpectedly. When I arrived, I was surprised to see another car parked beside my wife's. It was her brother's car. He was a buff dude, married with a baby that my wife would often babysit. She loved it because she looked forward to becoming a mother. Her and her brother were really close and enjoyed hiking. It didn't matter what the weather was like. All year round they would go on long hiking expeditions together. I didn't mind, it was their thing, and I was not an outdoorsy person. I'd usually work a little more or dedicate time to my hobby of building miniature boats. Although I fully supported their relationship, I became a little weary of my wife's brother when he became exceptionally emotional at our wedding and planted a huge kiss on his sister's lips. I couldn't do anything about it, it happened so fast. He asked me to forgive him later, blaming what he did on the high emotions he felt seeing his sister get married and leave the family. When I arrived home and parked behind my wife's car, I could hear slow music playing loudly. It was an odd setting to imagine my wife and brother-in-law in. I didn't have to imagine it because I walked in on them slow dancing together. He was holding her close to his body. Their embrace was that of a romantic couple's. When they noticed my presence, they broke apart quickly and looked really guilty. I knew my marriage was in jeopardy by their expressions. My wife tried to say her brother needed emotional support because his marriage was struggling. To me, that did not explain why they were slow dancing in my living room. As hard as it was, I didn't ask them any more questions. They were aware of how odd it looked. I didn't have to wait long before my wife went to go babysit her baby niece one day. She accidentally left her phone behind and I found her WhatsApp. It revealed that she was sexting her brother, sending pictures, saying I love you, and arranging hookups with him by claiming she was going to babysit. It was the most disgusting and disturbing discovery I ever made in my life. I threw her phone and ran to the bathroom to be sick. Everyone always assumed they were really close because they had trouble making friends when they were younger and shared an enthusiasm for hiking that no one else in the family did. I wouldn't confront her about it immediately because it certainly wouldn't have stopped them. I realized that I was just the cover husband, so she could have a secret sexual relationship with her blood brother. I went back to her phone as I boiled with anger and betrayal and took screenshots to send to myself. I planned out my revenge, which involved a bit of acting on my part. It was excruciating to see her behave so normally when returned home, like she didn't just hook up with her brother behind my back. I too acted as though everything was normal. I laid awake beside her that night in our marital bed. The very next morning, I hired a PI to get me photos of them. When I announced the truth, she wouldn't be able to wiggle out of the consequences. Not long after, she claimed she was going on a hiking trip with her brother and I played along, notifying the PI. He called me late that night and notified me that she got hotel room with her brother along the beach a few hours away. I started packing my things because it was only a matter of time before I got pictures. I didn't know why they weren't actually hiking together this time, but I didn't care either. At this point, I didn't care about anything and just felt numb. I received pictures of them walking on the beach and boardwalk like newlyweds. His hand on her butt, full kisses on the lips, staring into each other's eyes over drinks at the bar, both of them entering a hotel room, clearly in a romantic relationship. I was ready to leave, but before I left, I invited her immediate and extended family and friends over, including her brother's wife and baby. I printed large copies of the pictures I received and hung them all over the house, starting at the front door. On my way out, I left a note on the door instructing them to let themselves in. Little did they know, I left town for my friend's house with all my belongings and no plans to return. They called me after they entered home, frantically asking me what those pictures were. I spelled it out for them on speakerphone. These two members of the family were incestuous freaks that have probably been in a sexual relationship since they lived with their parents. Then I told them where they currently were if they didn't believe me and wanted to see for themselves. Hours later, I got a call from my soon-to-be ex-wife. She was screaming and I could hear the chaos in the background. It became clear that her entire family and a few of her friends had shown up at their hotel. Her brother was being beaten by cousins, in the hotel called the police. She asked why I did this to her, and I told her she deserved it. She had been living a lie that she wouldn't be able to continue anymore. I told her the divorce papers were on the table, and she started wailing. So I hung up. I was hurt enough as it was, and didn't want to dwell on how her life would turn out. Her mom called me a few days later to apologize on behalf of her daughter and son. She updated me and said the police never arrived at the hotel, so hotel staff started breaking up the fight themselves. In the chaos, the brother and sister fled to escape scrutiny. The whole family was a wreck for a few days, but things are settling amongst them now. The wife of the brother is filing for divorce as well, along with custody and child support. Before they fled, neither of them signed divorce papers, so that's a waiting game for now. I'm relieved this was all exposed when it was because I can't imagine continuing that relationship any longer without knowing the truth. I just want to put this all behind me and I feel like I'm on the right track. I found a nice place and continue working for the same company I was in. I'm continuing to take this one step at a time. This whole thing is still so surreal for me. OP, I can't imagine the emotional torment you've been through. I'm so relieved you didn't decide to start having children with her before all of this was revealed. It would have been horrible if she got pregnant by her brother and tried to claim the inbred child was yours. Although this discovery caused you pain, it is so much better that the truth is out. I love how you handled this situation because you knew announcing it immediately wouldn't cause them to stop and might have even backfired on you. You were patient and fast, aiming to gather the much-needed evidence you required. These two people are horrible, not just because of their actions, but because they married two people and hid the affairs they had. I believe luck is on your side. This couldn't have been worse if it came out years later. I wish you the best of luck, OP. Now for today's second story. My wife and I were both busy working people when I discovered our marriage was over. She was 27 and I was 33. We were only married for 2 years, but maybe that was a good thing. On the day it went down, we arranged a short getaway together at a cabin almost 2 hours away from our house. After we arrived and got settled, she asked me to look up a recipe she wanted to make for dinner. My phone was almost dead, so I plugged it in and wondered how she was going to handle this. Over the past few months, I noticed she was distancing herself from me. She was on her phone way more and even added a passcode on it. This was weird because we worked so much. Who would be trying to access her phone? She was so open with me up until it all changed, and she just didn't feel the need to tell me about her day. So I told her my phone was charging to see what she'd do. She unlocked her phone and tossed it to me as she stirred, telling me to look it up on hers. I did so and read it to her. As I was just about to lock her phone again to be locked out of it forever, a silent WhatsApp notification appeared. I didn't know she had that app. I clicked on it instinctively, and it led me to a string of messages between her and another man. The first 2 messages were, "Hey, how's it going? And I miss you so much. Can't stop thinking about how good you feel." I must have turned white because I felt the blood drain from my face. My vision became blurry, and I left the room with her phone. She was still cooking, unaware anything was wrong. I focused my eyes and stilled my trembling hands so I could keep reading older stuff. It spanned back farther than I was willing to look. I took screenshots of their sexting pictures, talk of past sex and plans for future sex. And there I love you. I grabbed my keys with her phone in my hand and left. I didn't say anything to her. As I drove, I forged a message to her lover saying that the getaway ended early and he should meet her at a specific restaurant at a specific time. He agreed. I drove for 2 hours, although it felt like forever. I was in deep thought about what my future held now that my marriage was over. I already had anxiety about the next woman. I fall in love with cheating on me. I wondered what this guy was going to try to do or say to me, but it didn't really matter. The most I wanted was an explanation. When I saw him enter, I recognized him from the pictures and videos. I entered the restaurant right behind him and wrapped my arm around his shoulders. He jerked away and looked at me with major concern. Before he could say anything, I told him who I was, that he stole my wife from me, and that we should talk about it. I led him to a table, started recording on my phone, which now had all the evidence from my wife's phone as well, and told him to spill the beans. He hesitated, but I told him this was the least he could do. He told me they had been seeing each other for about 10 months already. They were introduced by co-workers and instantly fell for each other. In a few weeks, she was in his bed. He swore she was the one for him, and he was in love. I told him he could have it. I had no more use for her. I thanked him profusely for saving me 18 years of child support. I told him where she was and asked him to go pick her up. I drove home with a broken heart. It was broken before, but it was worse knowing how long ago this started. My phone rang, and it was the landline from the cabin we were staying at. My wife was panicked, asking me if I was okay, and why I just left like that. She added that she couldn't find her phone and forgot we had a landline. I called her a liar and said she shouldn't have let me see her phone if she was guilty of having an affair. She was stunned and started stuttering to make excuses. I told her she need not bother, that I had already met with the man and got all the proof I need. She started yelling in surprise, trying to clarify where I knew and who I spoke to. I added that he was on the way to come get her, and she should pack all of our stuff. She said something else, but I hung up. I arrived home and packed up what I needed to be okayed for a few months. I didn't know how long she'd be in the house before she left. Thankfully, we got a prenup, so I wouldn't lose the house or pay her alimony. The last thing I did was update her social media, changed her status to single, and posted a selfie of the two. I put her phone down and heard it immediately start blowing up with confused friends and family. I called my best friend to vent and cry, and not only did he have space for me to stay for a while, but he also arranged for me to meet with his cousin, a divorce attorney. Before my friend arrived to pick me up, my wife was brought home by her lover. She was upset with me, which was ridiculous, and she kept asking me questions. For someone who knew what was going on, she sure was clueless. I started playing the recording of her lover explaining how they met and started sleeping together. She started crying her eyes out, claiming that he was exaggerating their relationship and she never planned on leaving me or continuing to see him. When she said this, he was standing in the doorway unbeknownst to her. He was offended and left. I thought good for him as he drove down the road and my wife screamed in frustration. I told her to pack her stuff and get out of the house because it belonged to me. I added that I'd send divorce papers to her parents' house. She sat on the front step crying as I left. I heard that she was still living with them when her boyfriend left her after an astounding 2 months. Since I have been paying for her schooling, she struggled to afford it on her own. Her parents couldn't afford it and actually made her move into a tiny apartment with her much younger sister. Meanwhile, I met the love of my life and we have our second child on the way. I can now say without a doubt that my wife is faithful, loving, and meant for me. I'm so thankful I decided to leave my ex right away without staying and trying to work it out. I am so sorry you went through this, OP. Thank the universe you didn't end up raising an affair child as your own or paying child support for years. It's extremely lucky you discovered the truth when you did and had the strength to take the steps you needed to. She started sleeping with a coworker without much hesitation or thought about her marriage with you. It turned out that even the man she cheated on you with dumped her. This is an excellent story to help spread hope to people that have been cheated on. It's definitely possible to let go of what you're used to and exist outside your comfort zone in order to heal and live a better life. I wish you and your new wife all the best. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's story.